Did you bring it up? You put it up here? Wanda, you are just so sweet. Is it?
It's probably cold now.
No, it's absolutely perfect. You got it too hot, which was absolutely perfect, and now it's just perfect. You didn't get your cup of coffee, Harold?
That's all right.
Okay. Yeah, a few technical difficulties tonight. We went to a wedding this afternoon. We went to Pastor Ross and Hannah Hope's wedding, and they are now Mr. and Mrs. David Ross, and it was a great time. Beautiful wedding, beautiful people. The problem is my Bible and my notes for tonight are in my truck, which usually I drive, but I did not tonight, so. But never fear, I always have something for you.
That's right.
But I don't want to do Revelation 17 because I really do have some really cool stuff in there for that, so I'm not going to try to do that off the top of my head. So I want to turn to Daniel. I want to turn to the book of Daniel, and I want to talk about 3 conflicts that happened in Daniel's and the lives of his friends, Daniel and his friends. They had 3 conflicts and how they solved the conflict. Because you know what? We do too. We have challenges that are before us, and we need to understand how we should go about solving those challenges. And I think we know, and I think we do a pretty good job at it. But I kind of want to look back at these guys and how they dealt with it and see if we can't learn a little something from the way they did things. So Daniel, where in the world? I done passed it. Ezekiel, Daniel. Yeah, I know. Yes, Daniel chapter 1. And first off, let's just talk a little bit about who these guys are so we can find out who we're talking about, right? So if we look at, ooh, my goodness, somebody did something up here. That is horrible. We got to do something about the pulpit, so somebody write a little note on here. There's a piece of wood that's actually, I don't know what they've done, but they've split it, and that splinter is going to stab me. I got a fat belly, and that thing just about went through me right there, and I was like, whoa, that would hurt. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about who these guys are. So Daniel chapter 1 and verse 4. You girls got a Bible? Huh? Where's your Bible at? You could read along with me. You could read along with me. Daniel chapter 1 verse 4. This is as much for you guys as it is for the adult, okay? Children in whom, this was the king spake unto Ashpenaz, that's verse 3, the master of his eunuchs, and he said he should bring certain of the children of Israel and of the king's seed and of the princes. And they found these guys right here, and so they're going to describe these kids. Because they are really just kids. They're probably very, they might be teenagers, Lucas. They might be just a little bit older than you, but certainly not much older than you were. And this is what they said about them right here. Children in whom there was no blemish, which means that they had fair skin. They were great kids. And well-favored. Well-favored in the King James, and I'm reading this in the King James, aren't I? Why am I doing that? Okay, but that's okay. Well-favored in the King James really means handsome. That's what that means. And skillful in all wisdom. They were cunning in knowledge. They had understanding science. And this is where I get this from, and that's why one of the reasons we were doing this is I teach this in my science class, and I thought you guys could learn a little of this too. And as such, they had an ability in them to stand in the king's palace. Now, what does that mean? They had this ability to stand in the king's palace.
They were favored?
Yeah, they were so favored, and they were so smart, intelligent. And so the king took notice of them right away. He said, man, you know these Jews that we brought over here? These are no slackers right here, you know what I mean? They're making our kids look pretty not too smart, because they really have a lot going on. And Daniel did. Daniel had a lot of wisdom from the Lord. And so in whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. So what does the king think? Okay, so they're great, everything they've learned so far, but now I can teach them our ways. Let's teach them our ways. How good do you think that worked out? Yeah, they didn't like that too much, right? So the king, verse 5, king appointed unto them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank. So nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. So see, he's thinking it's going to take them 3 years, and they can eat the king's meat, they can eat from the king's table, that's the best stuff, and drink the king's wine, and then they'll be ready for my service. They'll probably be about 16, 17 at that time. They'll be ready to go, right? And so among those chosen, verse 6, I'm going to switch to the NIV here, where I'm so used to reading the NASB, and that's what was throwing me off there a little bit. Among those that were chosen were some from Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now, you guys, if you've been to Sunday school much in your life, you probably don't recognize those names, but you might recognize the name Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are these three guys right here, but they're their Chaldean names. They are their names that Nebuchadnezzar gave them. He gave Daniel a name too, Belteshazzar. The funny thing is, we don't ever recognize Daniel by Belteshazzar, but we also don't understand Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah as that. We recognize them as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's a little funny, isn't it? So we know their Chaldean name, but we know Daniel's biblical name. So I don't know. It's just one of those things, I guess. So the chief official gave them new names to Daniel, Belteshazzar, to Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. And Daniel resolved, verse 8, not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. So what does this official think? So God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel, but the official told Daniel, I am afraid of my lord, the king who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men, your age? The king would then have my head because of you. Now, it says eunuch in the King James, and I still think that's a good word to use. I'm already disliking the NIV already here, and I'm sad because it reads better even in the NASB. So if you have any other version than the NIV, you're probably getting a better version. It's called a eunuch, and it's called a eunuch for a reason. These guys, they were either born eunuchs or they were made eunuchs, but basically what you guys need to know, the kids, is that they had no other purpose in life but to serve the king. They were never getting married. They were single. They were single for life. That's why they called them eunuchs. And they couldn't procreate, so there was no reason for them to get married. And notice how I used a big fancy word there, so I don't get questions. They'll go home and ask mom and dad what procreate mean. And they lived just for the king, okay? So that's what they were for. And so the king had these guys, and he said, hey, fatten these guys up, give them my meat, give them my wine, everything's going to be great. And Daniel said, listen, it would go against our religion to eat your meat, because that meat's been sacrificed to idols. We don't even know where that meat came from. Listen, just feed us vegetables and water. I think in the King James, it doesn't say, it uses a really weird name. It says, I don't even know where it's at now.
12.
What does it call it? You had it. Who was that? Wanda?
12.
Pulp. Was it pulp?
Vegetables and water. Give us pulse to eat and water to drink.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. And so what that is vegetables. That's what that is. So we can interpret that the right way. So Daniel said, just give us vegetables and water. And how many days did he ask for? You see that in there? How many days did he ask him to give him?
10 days.
10 days. He said, just do it for 10 days. And you'll see. You'll see in 10 days. Now, how did Daniel know that? How did Daniel know that?
That's from God.
He just had faith, Crystal. He really didn't know. He didn't know for a fact. But he knew he wasn't going to eat that king's meat. See, he didn't know that eating vegetables and water would actually make him look better. But he thought anything is better than eating that king's meat. So I'm going to pray to God. I'm going to ask God, if I'm faithful and we just eat vegetables and water, can we look better? And they did. And God caused the eunuch to have favor. That's kind of a key part, might get lost in this. God caused the eunuch to give him favor. Because listen, Lucas, if you worked for the king and the king told you, hey, go down there and have these guys eat the king's meat and drink my wine for the next 3 years and bring them back to me. And you know good and well that king, the last guy that didn't do what the king said, he chopped his head off. You're going to go down there and make sure they eat the king's meat and drink it. And if the guy says, hey, man, I want to drink, I don't really care what you want, okay? Because you know what? This is worth a little more than whatever you want, right? But you see, God had caused favor for the eunuch. And the eunuch, because God had done that, see, that's called providence. That's why we use these big fancy words, but I want you to understand. That's what providence, God's providence means. God had a will and a way, and God caused the eunuch to believe Daniel when Daniel said, hey, give me a shot. And the eunuch goes, okay, I know he said 3 years, so I guess I can wait 10 days. We'll wait 10 days and we'll see how it works out, okay? So the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king who hath appointed your meat, but, I'm going to let you do it. And so Daniel said to Melzar, verse 11, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, let them give us pulse to eat, water to drink, and then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days, and at the end of 10 days their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse, or vegetables. How about that? Worked out, didn't it? See, Daniel didn't really know that that would happen, but what he did know is that I'm not going to be disobedient to my Lord. I'm not going to do it. Look at chapter 2. In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Okay? That just means he didn't get a good night's sleep, Lucas. You ever have one of them? Or ever then when you wake up in the morning, you didn't even feel like you went to sleep, right? Yeah. That's the way Nebuchadnezzar felt, because he had this dream. His dream really bugged him. The king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers, the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. And so they came and they stood before the king. Now these are guys that's supposed to know everything, okay? This is Mr. Science. This is the Mr. Science guy. He calls him up. He's like, back then they didn't have the internet, but this was Google in the flesh right here, all right? Hey, Siri, I got something to ask you, right? So he gets all these guys together and he says this. The king says unto them, I have dreamed a dream. I'm in verse 3 now. Dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. That's always a nice thing to say to the king right off the bat, right? Just, O king, live forever. It makes the king feel good, right? And then they said, tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. In other words, you tell us what the dream is, we'll give you the interpretation. Isn't that the way it works? That's the way it works, right? You tell us a dream, right? But Nebuchadnezzar was thinking, I don't know. I think I've been down this road before, and I wouldn't doubt, Lucas. It doesn't say this in the scripture, but I don't doubt that he's had a dream before, and he's asked them to interpret it. It didn't quite work out like it was supposed to. And he's like, I don't know if I trust these guys or not, right? Second time, right? Shame on me, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so what does the king decide to do? All right, so look at verse 5. King answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. Now, I don't really believe that Nebuchadnezzar didn't remember the dream, but that's what he's going to tell them. You know what? The dream's gone. I don't know. I forgot it. If you will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill.
Jeez.
Yeah. Now they're like, oh, wait, whoa. Okay, so let me make sure I get what you're saying. Okay, so you've dreamed some dream, and it really bothered you. And you want to interpret it. Oh, we're in the business of interpreting. But you want us to tell us what the dream was? How in the world can we do that? We weren't in your sleep last night. I wasn't in your bed, right? I have no idea what you dreamed last night, right? Maybe he would have mumbled a little bit. Maybe we might have figured it out, right? Nah, can't figure it out. So they tell him. It says, verse 6, because, listen, their lives depend on it now. And you know why Nebuchadnezzar said that too? Because why do I have you around? Why are you eating the king's meat and drinking the king's wine if you can't tell me what my dream was and what they interpret? You're supposed to be the smart guys. You're Mr. Science. When was the world made? Right? Where did the dinosaurs go? Tell me. And if you can't tell me, I'm going to chop your head off, right? Well, you'll come up with something, right? But what if I said, hey, I'm thinking about something. You need to tell me what I'm thinking about, and then tell me why it's not there anymore. You'd be like, this guy just wants a reason to kill me, right? That's what you'd be thinking, right? So what does it say here? Verse 7. Am I in verse 7?
Yes.
They answered again and said, let the king, y'all keep track of where I'm at, right? And I'll keep track of the story. They answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. The king answered and said, no good, no do. I know of a certainty that you would gain the time because you see the thing is gone from me. But if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me the interpretation thereof. In other words, I'll believe your interpretation when you can tell me what I dreamed, okay? He wasn't taking no for an answer, was he? Now listen, they get a little frustrated, and so here comes verse 10. Chaldeans answered before the king and said, listen, there is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore, there is no king, Lord, nor ruler that asks such things at any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. In other words, they're like, hey, nobody's ever asked us to do this thing. No one's ever asked us this. You ask us the you tell us the dream, we give you the interpretation. This is how it works. And the king was having none of it, was he? He just was having none of it. And then they said in verse 11, this is a rare thing that the king requires, and there is none other than that, none other that can show it before the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not without flesh. In other words, they're saying, listen, the only person that could tell you what you dreamed is a god, right? Well, they got that much right, didn't they? Mm-hmm. Only they were saying their gods. That's why we have a little G there. They were talking about their gods. Now look at verse 12. Boy, Nebuchadnezzar, he was quite a guy. I mean, you have to give it, man. When he gets something in his head, he's going for it, right? It reminds me of some people I know. For this cause the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. In other words, hey, if I ain't got you all together here, we're going to make sure I get every single one of you. I'm wiping you all out. Now, who would that include? See, Daniel and his friends. But they weren't there because they weren't summoned. The Chaldeans, the Magi, they were summoned. They're still in waiting. You know, they're still eating the vegetables and the water. They're still getting ready, right? So they're not really ready yet, right? Little time has gone by, but they weren't part of the group yet. And where are we at? 13? So the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. Now here's the other thing about Nebuchadnezzar. He don't waste any time either. Like when he set this decree, this wasn't like the next day. Listen, read. And then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? And then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel, and then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time and that he would show the king the interpretation. See, so the way the story reads to me is the king says, okay, I've had enough. I've heard enough. These guys are saying it's impossible. It's impossible. Okay, fine, no problem. Arioch, get the sword, go on down there, start killing them. Start with them Jewish boys. So he goes down there to Daniel, and Daniel's like, whoa, what's the big hurry? And so Arioch tells him, you know, what happened. And so he goes, well, let me see if I can talk to, let me give it a shot. And Daniel goes and talks to Nebuchadnezzar himself. Now that had to take a little courage, right? Mm-hmm. And then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time and that he would show the king the interpretation. Now, it doesn't say anything Nebuchadnezzar did. But you know what? I think that made Nebuchadnezzar happy because Daniel went in there and he says, hey, give me a little time and I'll show you the dream and the interpretation. Now, did Daniel know what the dream was?
No. He wanted to talk to God.
He had faith. It's the same thing with the meat and the wine. He didn't know he would look better in 10 days. Not really. But he just knew, I'm not supposed to eat the meat. Now, Daniel didn't know what the dream was, didn't know what the interpretation was, but he knew he had a God that could tell him, and if God don't tell him, I'm dead. And I don't think God brought me down here to kill me, right? Sometimes I have to think about that as pastor of Hands and Feet Fellowship. God did not call me to start this thing just for it to die. Right? And so I face these conflicts sometimes. Should we just close up? Do we have enough money? Is enough support coming in? What's going on? Daniel teaches me a lesson right here. This is what you do. You say, nope, we're going to keep working. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep pressing on because God didn't call me down here to kill me. And I'm sure of that. So you give me some time. We'll figure it out. Right?
Right.
So what happened? Where are we at? 17?
18.
So 18? Oh, I don't think we did 17 yet. Daniel went to his house, and he made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. Now, why would Daniel do that? He needed support. Yeah. Daniel's like, you know what, I'm going to pray, but y'all pray too. Listen, we're about to get our heads chopped off here if we don't come up with this dream. Okay? And they had a lot of faith in Daniel too. And you could see that Daniel was their leader, even though they were all about the same. They had a lot of confidence in Daniel. Daniel had spoken to Nebuchadnezzar. He had spoken to the eunuch, the head eunuch, and he convinced him. Now he's actually had a talk with the king himself. So good luck, Daniel. And we're going to pray for you. And that's probably all they could tell him, right? Verse 18. That they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. All right, I've told you that part of the story. All right, verse 19. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Woo! I had to read this in class. I had a girl read it. And as she read it, I just was overcome with emotion because Daniel had no idea God would do this. And he prayed, and God gave it to him in a night vision. And he wakes up. And the first thing he does, listen, he doesn't get up and go, whoo, go run down there to the king and tell him the dream and give him the interpretation. No, Daniel stops for a minute and says this. Listen to what he says. Blessed be the name of God forever and ever. For wisdom and might are his. He changeth the times and the seasons. He removes kings and he sets up kings. He gives wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. He reveals the deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who has given me wisdom and might, and hast made known unto me now what we desired of thee. For thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. That's humbling to me. You got to see the emphasis in the right place. It's not just, hey, thanks for giving me this. No, Daniel's like, no, I asked. Little me, this little servant boy in Babylon. I'm not even at the temple anymore. I'm not even where God dwells. I'm hundreds of miles away, somewhere else. And yet God heard me and God answered my prayer. Oh, he thanked God, did he not? We got to remember to do that when we're in conflict and then God gives us a solution. Don't just jump into the solution. Make sure you take a little time to just remember who gave it to you. And remember who did it for you. Sometimes when that windfall falls in our lap to cover a bill that we wondered what we had. Listen, Brandy and I have some tax matters. I don't want to make our whole finances, completely out there. But we have some tax matters that we need to take care of. And lo and behold, the state of North Carolina decided to come along and just wipe out all of my savings. They did. They can do that. I did not know that. Didn't even give me a written notice. Gave me the notice after they did it. Now, they couldn't touch what was in my checking account because that account the IRS has, and they've deposited this money in there. So I have like $3,200 that's protected in that account. But if I put any more money than that in it, they can take whatever's above that. Now, listen, it wasn't a very large sum of money, but it was a little bit of money, and I didn't want to lose that money. That happened while I was at school last Friday. It was teacher work day. And so I prayed. I just prayed about it. I said, well, Lord, hey, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away, right? Mm-hmm. I got paid last week, so that helped a little. And so I'm like, I'll probably be okay. But, help me figure it out, Lord. Give me wisdom. This is no joke. I walk out of my room. I walk down the hall. This is like 30 seconds after I finish my prayer. And lo and behold, David Ross comes out of the Miss Hannah's room. He was visiting with her in there. And he comes out of the room right just as I wasn't going to see him. I was getting ready to leave because it was half day for us and I was done. And he walks out and he says, hey, Frank, how you doing? I said, oh, pretty good, Pastor. I'm doing great. And he said, great. Hey, you know what? You've been faithful to drive the bus for me for that, this past quarter. Listen, I want to help you out a little bit with that. And I just looked at him.
Cry.
Yeah.
I don't blame
Because
you.
I'm like, are you kidding? Are you kidding me?
Right.
I just prayed that something would happen. He says, come on in here, let me write you a check.
I believe it.
I said, you know what? I'm going to take it. He said, well, I'm going to give it to you. I said, no, listen. I said, because normally I would have just said, I just did that out of my heart. I didn't care. I didn't ask. He goes, I know. That's the main reason I'm paying you. You've never asked for a dime. I said, no, but listen, this is what you don't know. And I shared with him that. And he goes, man, isn't that something else? Because the moment that I saw you, the Holy Spirit says, you need to do something for him. All he's done, you need to do something for him. That's the kind of God we serve. And that's what Daniel did. He made a prayer, and that night, God didn't stream along for a couple days. He didn't wait till Nebuchadnezzar come down there and like, hey man, I got to send Arioch back down here or what? No, he gave it to him that night. First night he prayed, he gives it to him. He goes back to the king, tells the king, you know that, right? All right, I only got 5 more minutes to give you the last one. And I want to finish up. All right, so and then there was a third conflict. Now check this one out. This is why I wanted to sing that song, Nikki. So the third one is in chapter 3. Chapter 3, verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits, and the breadth therefore 6 cubits. And he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Anybody know how big is a cubit? What is it, Lucas?
3 feet.
Huh?
3 feet.
Approximately 3 feet. It's like from the tip of the fingers to elbow, about 30 inches, but it could be, you're pretty close, 3 feet. Okay, so this statue is about 150 feet, just to cut to the chase. It's about 150 feet tall, and it's about 15 feet wide. It's 15 stories tall. You can see this thing for a long ways coming, right? There's a lot of people there, though. They had a lot of children of Israel there and all that. So he builds this great big statue. And Nebuchadnezzar, verse 2, the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, captains, judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. I love this about the King James Version. I love this about the Bible. Do you know that it tells you, he brought together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces. And the weird thing is it says that about 4 more times in this chapter. Every time they come together, it's always the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges. It's like, okay, we get it. A bunch of big names coming to town, right? They're going to dedicate this statue. You get that? You get that, Lucas? They're coming to dedicate this statue. That's the main thing you want to get. So, verse 3, there they are again. I'm not going to read them all, okay? They were gathered together into the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image. And then verse 4, the king had a herald cried aloud and said, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, and I think this goes on for a while too, doesn't it? I had to turn the page here. That at what time you hear the sound, oh yeah, here's the musical instruments. They got to give you the whole rundown. It's the cornet, the flute, the harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music. Whenever you hear this, you fall down and you worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. You get the story so far, Lucas? What's going to happen?
Worshiping.
Music's going to play. You're going to see the statue. You're going to fall down and worship it, right? What did the Bible say in the 10 Commandments? Thou shalt have no graven images before me, right? You don't worship anybody else but God himself, right? All right, so we know that these boys are going to have a little trouble with that, right? If they had trouble with the king's meat, then they're going to have a little bit of trouble with this command, right? Just a little. Verse 6, so whosoever doesn't fall down, that same hour. Man, Nebuchadnezzar, he has a thing, man, with time. Like, you guys can't figure it out. Okay, get down there and start slaying these boys, And Daniel's like, why is this king always in such a hurry? Now, if you don't fall down, you got an hour. You got an hour. All right, therefore at that time when all the people heard the sound of all that music, and then all those people came, and then they didn't worship the king, they're going to get killed, right? Verse 8. So wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. Now notice it's certain Chaldeans. You know who the Chaldeans were? Whatever them same boys in there with Daniel, right? Do you think they were very happy that Daniel could go to the king and give him the interpretation? He went and told the king what the dream was and what the interpretation was. We didn't get a chance to read the rest of the story, but you can in your own time sometime. The king was impressed, to say the least. And he set Daniel up, baby. You are now my chief advisor for everything. Because you could do that. And you know what Daniel told him, by the way? I couldn't do anything. You know what? Those boys that came to you and told you that nobody could do that, they were absolutely right. I told you the same thing. I knew I couldn't do it either. I had to go before my God. My God gave it to me, right? But Nebuchadnezzar didn't care, as long as he got the interpretation, all right? So these Chaldeans, they were just a little jealous. You ever been there, Lucas? Where this one kid gets all the teacher's attention, teacher does nothing but lavish all over them, and it's like, hey, who am I? What am I doing here? Am I not getting an A? Am I not doing, whoa, what's going on? Hey, right? And that's the way these Chaldeans were. They're like, we ain't liking this very much, right? All right, so what did they do? They got jealous, right? So they spoke to the king, verse 9. And they said, "Oh, king, live forever." Man, I think they only know one line, right, Lucas? That's it. "Oh, king, live forever." You need to talk to me like that a little bit more. When you come and say, "Oh, pastor, live forever," right? That'd be nice. "Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the," all those things. And verse 11, "Whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." That was how they were going to be killed. A burning fiery furnace. You ever put your hand on a stove?
Yeah.
You ever put your hand on something hot?
Oh, I put it in.
Yeah. What happens?
It burns.
Did you get away from it pretty quick?
Yeah.
Drop it. Yeah. Yeah. Something that's burning, you don't get too close to, right? So just imagine that's what they're going to cast you into, is burning fires. And then there were certain of the Jews, verse 12, whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, this Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these men, O king, have not regarded thee, and they serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. He's like, we know for a fact that these three guys, when you're playing the music, they are not sitting down. They're not worshiping you, right? See how jealous they are? Little tattletales. See, even way back then, had these little tattletales. Well, you know what? I think it kind of irritated Nebuchadnezzar a little bit, don't you think? Look how irritated he was. Look at verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, he commanded these three boys to be brought here, and he says to them, now listen here, verse 14. Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you do not serve my gods nor worship the golden image which I have set up? He don't even wait for an answer. He just says this. Now, if you be ready, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, you know, all that stuff, and you fall down and worship the image, you don't fall down and worship the image which I have made, well, you'll do well. But if you worship not, you'll be cast that same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Never, never miss an opportunity to witness when someone gives you a loaded question. Woo! Nebuchadnezzar had no idea what he was asking these boys. Now I know we're a little past time. Y'all want to hear the rest of the story? All right, let's hear it. Nebuchadnezzar spake, verse 15, or verse 16. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we're not careful to answer thee in this matter. In other words, don't think that this is flippant and it's just not, some rehearsed thing. Listen, we understand what you're saying. We understand the gravity of the matter. We understand that if we do not fall down, we're going to be cast in this fiery furnace. We get it. So we're not going to say this, but one time. We're going to answer you carefully. Verse 17. If, it's a key word. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. Now listen, that was an if. Because God may and he may not. And they know that. But they also know, and they're telling the king, they're putting him on report right now. He can do it. And we know he can. Now, here's something that he definitely will do, though. Look at the next part. It says, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. In other words, whatever happens here, we're not going to be your responsibility anymore. He's going to deliver us out of your hand for sure. And then what does it say in verse 18? But if not, be it known unto the king, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Now, Lucas, plain English. They said, here it is, king. We're going to just lay it out for you. Listen, we believe that our God will save us. You throw us in that fiery furnace, we have every bit of faith that God's going to deliver us from it. But you know what? Even if he doesn't, we're not bound down to that thing. Fear not him who can kill the body. That was Nebuchadnezzar. Jesus said, don't fear the guy that can kill your body. Fear the guy that can cast your soul into hell. Mm-hmm. And that's what they were afraid of. Right. They're like, we bow down to that thing. We know where we're going when you put us in. If we don't go in that. Yeah, we live now. But later, we die a second death. Yeah. And we'd rather die the first. Just give it. We'll take death. And I love that song, Nikki. I love that song. What is it?
Another in the fire.
Another in the fire. That's why I wanted to sing that song tonight. But instead of singing it, we saw the story, right? And sure enough, they throw them in the fire. Lucas, they throw them in the fire, and the guys they've got the strongest guys. They got guys like your dad, man. They got like 6 of those guys to handle these 3 guys, right? And Sean and his boys, they throw them in there, and the fire is so hot that it kills the 6 guys that threw the guys in there. It kills them. That's how hot the fire was.
They said, turn it up.
And Nebuchadnezzar's like, oh, be doggone, look at there. We done threw these 3 boys in there. How did 4 get in there? There's 4 people in there. One looks like the Son of God. Yeah. See? They believed God would do it. They believed God would do it with absolutely no reason to believe that he would, except the fact that they knew that they would not compromise. Daniel didn't know that if he ate the vegetables and drank the water, he was going to be better. But what he did know was that if I eat the king's meat and drink his wine, I am condemned. Yeah. Daniel didn't know that God would actually give him the dream and keep him from being killed, but Daniel had faith to believe that God had sent him to Babylon for a purpose, and if he did, then here it is, and give it to me, and God did, and God proved to him who it was. And these boys, when faced with a temptation to bow down before a graven image, said, we know better than to do something like that. Listen, every single one of us, you're going to face conflicts in your life this week. You got to understand that there are consequences behind what you're choosing. There's consequences behind what you're choosing. You can choose to do the easy thing now and live the life now. Or you can choose the really hard thing to stand up, and it may kill you to do it, but you'll find a place in heaven when you're done, rather than that place in hell that we've been talking about, right?
Right.
Let's
Amen.
bow our heads.